The most important animatronic regarding the story of Five Nights at Freddy's was never Freddy Fazbear. Unless you're talking about Glamrock Freddy, and exclusively meaning Security Breach. But taking into account the story, specifically the original era between Fnaf 1 to Ultimate Custom Night, there was one who was more important than any other, and that was the Marionette. Now, you may assume that I am biased, but no, the Marionette was a vital character connected with every aspect of the lore, from being the one who made the animatronics haunted, to being one of the many hunting the Purple Man, likely the one who was spearheading it, to being the child of a major character, to being the one animatronic who continuously returned even when its own band was recycled away. The Marionette was a giant piece of the puzzle, but it isn't anymore, and it likely never will be again. So, who is this strange bot, and what happened to it? Marionette, also known as the Puppet, is a Jack-in-the-Box styled animatronic who was stationed in the prize counter at the 1987's toy-based Freddy's location. We don't know much about what it did there, but we do see it handing out gifts and cake in various official material, so its primary function was likely just to hand stuff out, likely prizes. The puppet is a humanoid animatronic, but it is stylized to look very much like a sock monkey. Its body seems to be made out of like a velveteen in Fnaf 2, but in later games it looks more plasticky. It's mostly black and white, with a long black body and limbs with white stripes around the lower arms and legs, and 3 fingers instead of a proper hand. It also has 3 white buttons on its chest. Its face is a porcelain mask, one with almond-shaped black empty eyes, which sometimes have little dots of white light in them, like in the end of night cutscenes in Fnaf 2. It has purple stripes like tears that lead from its eyes to its mouth, and its mouth is styled in a big open grin. It has round cheeks and lips that look pink in Fnaf 2, but in some other games and merchandise they occasionally tend to look red instead. It usually stays in its box, but it is also shown held on a marionette cross by strings that connect to the head and arms. This, however, was cut from Fnaf 2. In minigames and jump scares, the marionette seems to be shown levitating on its own, with the sole exception being Help Wanted, where it walks to the office with wobbly noodle legs, which I'll cover later. The levitation seems to be its primary way of getting around, and this is a tribute to just how haunted this thing is. Now, the gender of the marionette is interesting. Originally not given a gender, the ghost possessing the puppet was revealed to be a girl in Pizzeria Simulator, who I will cover later. However, the game directly after this, Ultimate Custom Night, not only refers to it as a male 3 times, but he is presented as one of Toy Chica's suitors in the Chica's high school years cutscenes. Now, why this is simple. The puppet character itself is male, the soul possessing the puppet is female. Like how it's widely believed that Golden Freddy is possessed by a girl named Cassidy, or how Cassidy possesses Bonnie in the Silver Eyes. The character and the soul do not have to be the same gender. Despite this, however, the puppet is occasionally given more feminine attributes, but it is still male. Let's say he's in touch with his feminine side. Or hers. So technically, he, she, it, most pronouns cover the puppet and are correct. However, I'm going to flip-flop between calling it an it and a he. Now, on the personality spectrum, for years the puppet seemed to be a silent, detached figure. We knew nothing about it, what its goals were, what it thought. We had a suspicion of the backstory, but as for whether or not it did what it did out of mercy or vengeance was unclear. However, Ultimate Custom Night finally gave us a closer look at the puppet's personality.
The others are under my protection. The others are like animals, but I am very aware.
Taking his words at face value, the puppet is protective of the other animatronics and the souls murdered at Freddy's. However, he still considers himself to be above them. That is, he's more intelligent and aware. Where they almost become feral, Marionette is observant and at least somewhat cunning, which lines up with what Phone Guy says about it.
It's always thinking, and it can go anywhere. I don't think the Freddy mask will fool us.
The important part is that it seems like he's telling the truth, and that his main goal is to protect the others, at any cost, to them or himself, to the point where the puppet has been instrumental in creating other haunted animatronics, giving them a second chance to get revenge, a gift of life, but at the price of being in their metal prison, trapping others just like itself. Though unlike the one you shouldn't have killed, it's less that the puppet is forcing souls to stay out of anger and instead more so this misguided gift. Honestly, we don't entirely know why the puppet does what it does, and unfortunately, we probably won't ever know. But with that out of the way, let's go through the lengthy history of the puppet in-game and in the story. A lot of the things that I've already mentioned, the gender, different appearances, voice lines, personality quirks, we're going to get back into them as we cover this very long history. The puppet was first revealed in Fnaf 2 as being one of the toy animatronics, stationed in the prize counter, like I said earlier. But the puppet was different. Whereas the other toys were these plasticky animal animatronics, the puppet stood out as this porcelain-faced mime stuck in the corner. But from drawings on the wall, it seems like the children liked the puppet well enough, probably because the usual interaction with it was it handing out presents. But the adult employees weren't nearly so keen on it. Resident phone guy himself seemed to be off-put by the puppet, clocking it as being aware and watching.
I'll be honest, I never liked that puppet thing.
And he was right, for the puppet was very aware and active. As revealed in Fnaf 2's minigames, the puppet was originally a child who was locked out of a diner one night. Possibly Fredbear's family diner. While the titular bear fed cake to hungry children, or guy in a suit did, a purple car pulled up outside and an equally purple man got out and approached the child. The child's eyes widen, and then he turns gray being used to signify the killed children's bodies, and the purple man being shown in the same game to be their murderer. So yes, the child was killed. And after he was killed outside of the diner, it possessed the puppet. It isn't shown how, but the puppet's jump scare at the end of the minigame telegraphs that this is its backstory. But this is just the beginning. We also see a minigame of a restaurant before the one in Fnaf 2, where withered Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy were originally stationed. 5 children were murdered there, and the minigame shows the puppet giving them gifts. And when that doesn't work, it then gives them life by putting them in the suits. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, and then a 5th one hidden in a blink and you'll miss it golden bear. There has been some argument to whether or not the puppet put them in the suits or if it just put the suit heads on them and then someone else put them in the suits later. For simplicity's sake, I assume the puppet put them in the suits. But through this, the puppet gave these other animatronics life like it had, causing them too to become possessed. The final minigame of importance is the Save Them minigame. Now taking place at the Fnaf 2 restaurant, the puppet lures Freddy through the restaurant, telling him to follow it and save them. And we know this is the Fnaf 2 restaurant because they are already withered and in the back rooms, while the toy animatronics are shown on stage. Throughout the building, you can see the bodies of more children scattered around, and the minigame can unceremoniously end with the purple man running out from nowhere and going at Freddy, upon which you get the message, "You can't. Save them, you can't." The puppet is also seen during the end of night minigames standing in front of Freddy and staring into his eyes. Chica and Bonnie also look at him later. I'm guessing this event happened between the Give Gifts and Save Them minigames, with the puppet either coming to see if Freddy was haunted or coming to get him to go after the purple man. Likely the latter. Likely the crusade to track down the killer was spearheaded by the puppet itself, leading the other animatronics to hunt him down. This would make a lot of sense, though later games seem to muddy the waters a little bit, but we'll get to that. In short, Fnaf 2 tells us a lot about the puppet, even if it took a few other games to confirm what we saw. But if we put the backstory aspect aside, the lore aspect, the puppet still stands out for what it does during the game, and that's with its unique mechanics, which till this day are a source of contention when it comes to Fnaf 2 itself. The puppet cannot be fooled with the mask. It cannot be kept out with flashlights or doors. It can only be held back with the music box, and you have to keep this music box wound. So while you're fighting off a multitude of animatronics, you have to keep checking the prize counter screen on the monitor and winding up the box. Because if you don't, the puppet will be released from its box and come to the office, where it will jump scare you. And unless you are like 3 seconds from the end of the night, the puppet will get you and it's game over. Needless to say, this mechanic is a source of the most of the lukewarm reception FNAF 2 got over time. Like at the time it wasn't a huge deal, but nowadays it seems to have been a source of annoyance. That's kind of why FNAF 2 tends to be one of the lesser favorites of the lot. But that being said, there's no doubt that this mechanic was unique for the time and continued to be every time it returned. Or, well, the one time it returned. The more important part is that this mechanic contextually shows us that the Marionette is a rather sizable threat. He can't be fooled like the others, and when he's set free, he zooms across the pizzeria and launches himself at you, assumedly killing you just as easily as the other ones. That, and the suggestion of it floating, makes it seem, well, a lot more paranormally powerful than the others. But that would align perfectly with the minigame appearances. But that's enough of FNAF 2, and that was enough for the restaurant. Due to an incident and more children getting killed, the new Freddy's closed after only a week, and the toy animatronics were all retired, as shown as soon as the next game. They were deconstructed. Their limbs piled up in a box. But not the puppet. Where the puppet went for many years between FNAF 1 and 3 is unclear, but likely the best guess is that it was just somewhere in the building. Until decades later, when something else was removed. So between the two games, the Purple Man Killer's past caught up with him, as did the ghosts of the deceased children. He fled into his suit, a springlock suit, but accidentally set it off, becoming trapped in it, killed in it, and becoming Springtrap. And for years he was sealed up in Freddy's until Fazbear's Fright opened. Fazbear's Fright being a horror attraction based off of the murders at Freddy's, as tasteful as always. During the game, the unknown security guard must not only fight back Springtrap with a bunch of obnoxious BB recordings, but ward off the Phantoms, a group of either haunted apparitions or hallucinations. One of which being the Phantom Puppet, the ash-stained and burned mirror of the puppet. If you look at camera 8 at the wrong time, when the puppet is there, the Phantom Puppet will appear in front of you, get up close and personal, sort of like it did in FNAF 2's End of Night minigames, and start dialing in your face. Like the other Phantoms, this can't end your run. This is simply a distraction to let Springtrap get closer, and soon enough the Phantom Puppet disappears. And that is all. But what is interesting to note is that when you see Phantom Puppet in the camera, it is not the Phantom Puppet, it is the actual puppet. And I don't think this was an oversight. I've seen some speculation that this was an accidental use of the wrong model, but I don't think that is the case due to what we find out later. And that is that unlike the FNAF 2 toys, the puppet was not deconstructed. It somehow escaped its fate. And it ended up in Fazbear's Fright, where the end of the killer and the freeing of the trapped souls was supposed to arrive in a likely premeditated blaze. But it did not. There is a minigame that seems to show the animatronics moving on, including the puppet who brings a cake to the party. But due to later games, it's unclear if this cutscene ever happened at all, or if escaping Freddy's just didn't take. What happened to the puppet directly after this is shocking, to say the least, but before we get into that, let's cover a few games before we get to the finale Inferno. The puppet does not appear in FNAF 4, but the final boss, the Nightmarionne, is a variant of the puppet. Now, since I have a whole video dedicated to the Nightmarionne, and since it's so different to the puppet, I won't be covering it much here, save mentioning when he shows up. In this case, Nightmarionne is the technical final boss, as he was added on the Halloween update. He resembles Marionette greatly, save that he's all black and white, has teeth, and has licorice whip-looking fingers and legs. Other than that, his mechanics are recycled from former final boss Nightmare, so there's not really too much to read into them. The next game that the actual puppet appears in is FNAF World, where the puppet, the Phantom Puppet, and the Nightmarionne are all playable characters. The puppet and the Phantom Puppet are supposedly some of the earlier characters you can unlock by wandering the world, but for some reason whenever I play the game, I never unlock them until I reach one of the final areas, the Circus Funhouse. Which could just be due to luck, maybe. Nightmarionne is only unlocked in the Halloween update when you complete the Foxy EXE minigame, meaning you have to beat the main game to get him. Here's his line when you find him. "I would help you if I could, but my code is being used for a second-rate horror game. Maybe if you beat the game and get my code back, then I could help." And yes, he is a very big help, but let's start with Marionette. And let me also mention that, and I might be wrong, I think this is the first game where the puppet is directly called Marionette, but I couldn't source this. Anywho, his tagline is, "Think outside the box." The puppet is small, cutesy, and cartoony, looking very much like his normal form, but baby-sized. And those dots of white light are always in his eyes like pupils. I suppose black holes would have been a little too creepy for such a cheery atmosphere. He has 3 moves. Prize Ball 2 does a random strong attack. Mystery Box randomly swaps out all the characters for other ones, even ones you don't have unlocked. But you can't keep them after the fight. And Escape Key, this one can instantly kill a bunch of enemies, but it has a low chance of doing so. Marionette is an okay character, not too powerful, but does have some good backup options. Because he's my favorite, I usually play with him on like a team of a bunch of beefy monsters. I gotta say, I'm kind of surprised he doesn't have the gift box move that gives the other characters an extra life. It makes sense that he wouldn't because he's in the lower brackets, but thematically that would have worked well. Next is Phantom Puppet. Put it back in the box. An appropriate tagline. What's funny is during attacks, his head will grow giant. This is a reference to it sticking its big ol' head in the way in Fnaf 3. Goofy, but a goodie. His moves are Jump Scare, which stuns enemies, Hot Cheese 2, that slowly eats away health over time, and again, Mystery Box 2. Maybe not gift box, but at least there's a box involved here. Phantom Marionette is about the same as Marionette, save that his move pool is a little better. Okay, a lot better actually, but no escape key, so no cheese. Save the hot cheese. The Nightmarionne is more powerful than his 2 predecessors, having Prize Ball 2, like Marionette, and Fourth Wall, one of the most powerful attacks in the game. He also has Bubble Breath, which protects anyone from getting poisoned. It took me until now to imagine this thing with Bubble Breath. That is creepily adorable, I'm all for it. So neat characters and additions. Nothing else really to say about this lot. No direct story connections, so, well, more than anyone else. So it's time to move on to Pizzeria Simulator. And the fate of the puppet. Pizzeria Simulator involves the story of a man who tries to end the horrors at Freddy's by opening one last business as a ruse to lure together the last remains of the old ones. Every lost monster, including the Purple Man himself, William Afton, are drawn in by the promise of more victims to slaughter. But where is the puppet? There's no sign of him. There is a different puppet, though. For purchase in the Pizzeria Simulator proper, the security puppet is a sort of statue that assumedly works as security for the business instead of as an actual animatronic to perform on stage, because it isn't shown moving. The security puppet looks a lot like our puppet with some noticeable exceptions. First of all, it has a rounder head and a broader chest, with stripes on it and along the lengths of its arms instead of just on the lower half of them. Its tear marks are blue and its lips and cheeks are red, with only the bottom lip in this case. Only one white button, too. Its mask is split almost like a Fun Times, and at the top of the head is a singular prong that hangs back, sort of like a jester's cap prong, even down to the golden bauble at the end. It has matching gold dots in its eyes as well. Due to its build, it looks like the security puppet doesn't have legs but is instead mounted onto its box, which is red and purple-black striped, instead of the original puppet's blue and purple one. It's an interesting design, and it even has an attached minigame. We'll get back to that though. But it doesn't really do much, and it never really appears again. Well, no, it actually has a brief cameo in Ultimate Custom Night, but it doesn't really do anything except stand in the background. Okay, originally that's where I ended things about the security puppet, but I decided to tack on a little more because honestly, I think this is an adorable design. The big friendly eyes take a lot of the creepy factor out, and the goofy little bell is a really cute addition. Honestly, the only thing that could have made it better was if they just went full jester. But what I don't understand is why the security puppet never came back. I mean, this is the same game that introduced the mediocre melodies as being basic animatronics, and yet now they're some of the most frequently appearing characters in the franchise. It's kind of a letdown that the security puppet didn't get the same treatment. Even if it was like a little attraction set up in the corner of the pizzeria in Help 1 and 2, that would have been a really neat callback. Especially if there was like a creepy mask-off withered form. But hey, it happens. Security puppet dies like a rock star. Literally. It's just a prop, and it's not our puppet. Our puppet is absent. But there is a mysterious bear up for sale. Dirt cheap. Resembling Freddy, but not quite so. This is Lefty, and Lefty has a dark secret. One of the men from Freddy's distant past, a man named Henry, had a connection with the puppet, and in his crusade to end the tragedies surrounding the business, he knew that he had to capture and contain it, as it was the one who was bringing more to life. So we built a containment unit, and that unit was Lefty. Lure, Encapsulate, Fuse, Transport, Extract. Now how Lefty worked was very deliberate. First, it would lure the puppet in, using a false sensory output that would resemble a security bracelet, which we'll be back to momentarily. Using the frequency FZ554, it would make itself resemble a child wearing a bracelet to an unsuspecting security bot, and lure it in. The lure being set into its dead left eye. It would then encapsulate, trapping the puppet inside of it, during which it would use a dream wand soother, which was its microphone, to administer lullabies, likely my grandfather clock, to keep the puppet in a docile state. However, directly beneath it, it states, upon suit seal, provides steady voltage throughout. Behavior upon suit seal, not guaranteed. Now, the meaning of this term has been sort of disputed. Some folks say that the voltage throughout is just powering the suit, but I find it odd that one of the features of the animatronic would be that it runs on electricity. That's like saying, see this remote? Top of the line, the batteries give it power. Since this is a soother, I believe this is the one way we know how animatronics are contained and controlled throughout the series. A controlled shock. Perhaps it's supposed to be a low-dose shock. Maybe it only shocks if the puppet tries to leave it. But in every case of us seeing animatronics getting dosed with a steady jolt of electricity, it always looks painful, and I don't expect this to be any different. Continuing on, the puppet would be fused into the suit, where it could no longer escape, and then be transported back to Freddy's, where it would wander a maze of vents, sounds, and smells, trapped with its murderer, William Afton, and the rest of his monsters. The puppet would wait out the week wandering the maze until the final day, when Henry's plan would go into motion. And that plan was to set the whole place on fire, but this time, the building was built like an oven. Nothing would make it out alive, assumedly, and they would all go together. But why did Henry want this? Well, that's because Pizzeria Simulator reveals the shocking truth. The puppet is actually possessed by his daughter, who died outside of a restaurant one night long ago. This is shown to us in the security puppet minigame. This minigame shows us a glimpse of the past where the puppet was instead used for security purposes, where it would be set to monitor a specific color of security bracelet and the child wearing it. This time it's looking for a child wearing a green bracelet, but it cannot find it. Interesting enough, but the puppet in the minigame looks a little different than ours, with green eyes and missing the stripes on its arms and legs. It also seems to be hovering around of its own volition, but that could just be due to the limited animations. It could be on strings, but how it detaches itself to walk outside, let's just call it an animation thing and leave it at that. Same with the coloring. Anyway, after 2 minigames comes the third, where we catch a cutscene of the security puppet's box being blocked up by presents and a child being stuck outside the diner crying. The security puppet gets free, but the child fades away. The puppet heads outside, heads around the back of the diner, the rain causing it to slowly break down, dragging, and then crawling along the way to the child's body, laying abandoned beside skid marks and trash. The puppet collapses beside her, and the minigame ends. This depicts the moment that the little girl possessed the puppet. While never mentioned, this daughter is assumed to be Charlie, who may be a familiar name if you read the books. Charlie Emily was the main character of the Silver Eyes trilogy. The final in the series, The Fourth Closet, had actually came out before Pizzeria Simulator and had a marginal impact on the games, as it was the place where Henry was introduced. Well, the trilogy was. In fact, you would have had to read the trilogy to know really anything about Henry. And it steered the direction that Baby's character took. And due to this importance, I can say without much doubt that Henry's daughter, while not named in the games, is very likely Charlie. And like in the books, she was taken in the games as well. This was her fate, to become the puppet and the protector of the animatronics, until she was stopped by her father. It explains everything. Except one tiny little thing. So in Henry's final speech, he reveals that this minigame and the one in Fnaf 2 are the same. They are absolutely the same. This is the same event. She was the crying child. Except... she wasn't. The crying child outside the diner was initially a boy, not Charlie. And if you've watched any of my past puppet videos, you know exactly what I'm about to put you through. So I have a theory that the puppet used to be the crying child. I've talked about it a bunch and it's not really important for this video, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't cover it. I'll at least skim it down a bunch and give you the basics. So, Fnaf 4 was originally the final game. Scott said shortly after it released that all 4 games told the whole story, and 87 was hidden in Fnaf 4 source code, indicating at one time that it was the bite of 87. Then it became 82, then it became 83, yada yada yada. And the child survived the bite of 87, which could have led to the crying child being outside of the diner from the Save Him minigame. But things were changed, with the biggest change being how the story changed to include more book themes, such as Henry's arrival and Baby's change in characterization. I put Hernies there. My belief is that one of these changes was making the puppet Charlie to connect with the books, both so that the book readers would recognize the name and to give a reason for Henry to step in like he did. Here's the actually somewhat circumstantial evidence for the puppet having been the crying child. Number 1. They look very similar. Stripes, tears, they're even shown crying in the same pose. This might not seem like much, but designing characters to resemble each other tends to have some meaning, or at least some relation. 2. The unopened box at the end of Fnaf 4 resembles a dummy box, like a lot. The kind that puppets and dummies are stored in between shows. Like, it really looks like one. Take a look at the ones I was able to find. I even found them in the same color without specifically looking up the color. 3. Like I said, the minigame originally said Save Him, and is confirmed in Pizzeria Simulator to be the exact same minigame through the ending, meaning the child was originally a boy. 4. The puppet is often connected to the phrase, "Don't wake the baby," coined by Markiplier. This phrase is even referenced in the Nightmarionne teaser for Fnaf 4, and the crying child is directly referenced as kind of a baby, which could be coincidental, save that the final boss puppet references it directly. That makes it a little more noticeable. 5. Like I said, Fnaf was supposed to end at 4 and was supposed to be the entire story, meaning that Henry Emily and Charlie Emily wouldn't have been alluded to at all. 6. And continuing on that, the crying child storyline playing back into being the backstory of the puppet would have explained why we were hearing the story at all. Think about it. Why do we hear the crying child story? Especially when, at that point in time, there wasn't much to indicate about Mike's story, which was really set into motion by sister location in the books. The puppet was the main character for all intents and purposes, so it kinda made sense. 7. For some reason, I just repeated the 87, 82, 83 thing and the fact that the 87 bite wasn't fatal, so just keep that in mind. And, okay, also I added here, why would he be outside of Freddy's? He ran away from home and headed there, but wasn't let inside because, you know, Freddy's discriminates against victims, and the kids wouldn't let him in anyways as they bullied him all the time. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Were they bullying both kids? 8, and finally, and this is very circumstantial, but it is kinda telling, the crying child was presented as this important character in Fnaf 4 and is often teased, repeated. I should mention that, because there have been characters who have appeared maybe once and never again, but the crying child is often teased. But he was never featured or mentioned directly ever again, or of any importance at all after FNAF 4, when the switch would have happened. And it makes sense why the crying child would suddenly be dropped as an active character once his role was changed. And you may say he's Golden Freddy. If that's true, and he was never the puppet, then I find it weird that we've been constantly battling with Cassidy hints over ownership of the bear. To the point where now there's like 3 assumed possessing it, maybe 4 if David rolled over from Tiger Rock.
How many kids you got in there?
So, yes, I personally believe the puppet was the crying child, and it was retconned, and due to reasons outside of my control, I, for some reason, feel the innate need to bring this up all the time, even though it doesn't matter. If only for the fact that SAVEHIM is like the only suspected retcon that we actually have evidence for. But in any case, moving on. Lefty is technically the puppet's stand-in for the game, though I don't notice it playing too differently from the others. It probably does. But basically it crawls around the vents, and you have to keep luring it away while you get your paperwork done. Elsewise, it jumps you, scares you, and shushes you. Shh. But this isn't about Lefty. In fact, this is more so about what he does, and his connections to his creator, Henry. So, Henry disappeared for years and has finally come back to end the nightmare, including the continued suffering of his dear daughter. And that's why he captured her, and that's why he burned her. I have discussed this before, but I think I should at least briefly mention that Henry's methods of disposing of his daughter were rather heavy-handed. He captured her, and then he could have set her free then. But instead, he wanted them to go out together, so he tossed her in with her murderer and let her stew before setting her on fire, all the while giving a sweet speech about how they're finally going all together. Not considering the fact that by them all going together, there was not going to be anyone watching to make sure that nothing left afterwards. Henry might have been blinded by grief, but that doesn't make his methods any less cold. And so he both believes this is his daughter and yet still treats her like an object. Him telling the other machines that the souls they have don't belong to them. Does he feel the same way about the puppet? Does he believe these machines, only strung around by souls, are holding on to the spirits when they are the ones being puppeteered by them? It isn't important, but what is that the one protector of the animatronics, the one animatronic that was aware of the danger, leading the others, and the one person who was consistently over the years fighting back against Afton, since Michael was MIA for a long time and Henry took off, this one was taken off the table by way of trickery and flambe. I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been trapped inside of that bear. There's a video by The Nick of Time called Old Wounds that I recommend you checking out. It's about the puppet, because its depiction of the puppet's capture is excellent, equal parts sad and horrifying. This was, as far as we know, one of the only people involved in the missing children incident who was pushing for a happiest day and a happy ending. But instead of gently passing after fulfilling their revenge, discarding their mask at a ghostly party they provided for, they were instead stolen away, again, forced to confront their murderer, and then burned. The tragic ending, but for the greater good, right? Well, normally I would say good enough, but unfortunately the story doesn't end there. Though the puppet story, yes, ends right there, in that blaze. Well, except for Ultimate Custom Night. Ultimate Custom Night takes place after Pizzeria Simulator and is highly implied to be the afterlife for likely William Afton himself as he deals with the never-ending onslaught of his past victims constantly pursuing him without rest. All inflicted by the one you shouldn't have killed, or the one he shouldn't have killed. It is suggested that the souls that were supposed to be set free are all still trapped in limbo due to this one angry soul, forced to continue hunting Afton forever. But it could also be that it is just that singular soul in control, and that all of the others did already move on without him. Hopefully that's the case, because that would be pretty embarrassing if one of the souls Marionette brought to life through the animatronics was now forcing them all to stay behind while it played stabscotch with Willie Afton. Especially since, for some reason, the puppet suddenly seems to have a rather blasé opinion of him.
I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way. I recognize you, but I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore.
Also, yes, the puppet talks now. Here's where it starts talking. But it shows some apathy towards him. This contrasts with basically everything established by its other voice lines, including the one where it gleefully kills him. It's complicated. In fact, this line is what makes me sort of question if we are actually playing as William, or maybe Michael in limbo. William's burning in a sea of fire. Maybe Michael's the one stuck in the office because the animatronics still can't tell the two apart. Maybe, perhaps, or maybe the puppet just is over the whole Afton thing and now that he's currently in hell, who knows. But apathy or not, the puppet's there and it has familiar mechanics. Instead of being in the prize corner, he's now sitting in the kitchen with Chica and you have to wind the music box to keep him there. He has a music box on that screen, but also there's a global music box that you can use that takes power but can be activated from anywhere. So a pretty sizable threat if you aren't up for babysitting. Also, like I said long while back, this is the game that confirms Marionette as being male, and this isn't like a Mangle situation where it's listed as a he and then a she. Marionette's description calls him a he 3 times with 3 different variations. And this game was created by Scott and made directly after Pizzeria Simulator's daughter reveal. So yes, Marionette is a guy. And if it wasn't clear enough, he's actually made into anime form and is one of the bachelors Toy Chica pines for. She longs for his strings. His long, beautiful strings. Now what's disturbing is that Toy Chica's plan for capturing the puppet sounds rather familiar.
Look at those strings! Those long, beautiful strings. He'll be mine by the end of the day. I just know it. I told him to come over later. That should be enough. And if he doesn't show up, I'll just go to his house. And if he doesn't open the door, I'll just find a window. Chimney's always an option. Or I could set the house on fire and wait for him to run out. Then he could run into my arms.
So, she tries to lure him in, and if he doesn't show up, she's going to his house and setting it on fire and then waiting for him to come out to run into her arms. Now, I can't say this is directly relating to Lefty, but if the puppet was captured after Fazbear's Fright burned down, then he could have been caught outside the building after it was set on fire, a fire that was likely purposefully set to stop Springtrap. Maybe by Henry? There's no confirmation for this, but it is something interesting and disturbing to think about. 2 birds with 1 stone, really. Oh, something else. This one is kind of like a non-important thing, but it is kind of ironic that the thing that she ends up taking from him is his, assume it may be his head, but it looks like it's his mask. And by the end of the series, the puppet's going to be just a mask. So, maybe a callback, probably not. But speaking of Lefty, now, he too is back in this game. He sits off in a closet and becomes more active with sound and heat, slowly getting up, edging closer, and eventually coming to jump scare you. But like the puppet, he can be soothed by the global music box, but it has to be the global. He doesn't have his own. He also has a new set of voice lines instead of just shushing.
Shh. I've been looking for you, and now I will never let you go.
All are unsettling if you take in the whole trapped forever inside Lefty's belly thing into account.
Come spend eternity inside with me.
Strangely enough, one of these lines is later reused and revoiced by Circus Baby, but I don't think it was like a callback, just a similar situation reusing a voice line.
I'm so glad that I found you. Let me make room for you.
I am so glad I found you. Let me find room for you. Inside.
Nightmarionne returns as well, with a rather intense voice.
This is a nightmare that you won't wake from.
He's very fun at parties. Gives me Ink Demon vibes.
You cannot hide forever. I will find you
That'll give you the shivers. But Nightmarionne basically appears on the screen, and if you have your cursor on him, he becomes more solid until he jump scares you. So, you basically have to keep your mouse moving. It's not too difficult. But that is really the puppet's full role in Ultimate Custom Night. And with it, its final canonical storyline appearance, technically. The end of the line. And the unfortunate truth about that, but we will cover that momentarily. Let's instead venture into the new era of Fnaf. The puppet's next appearance was in Help Wanted, a game that takes place in-universe as a cover-up for Fazbear Entertainment to portray all the rumors surrounding them as hoaxes, by showing the events of past games in fun, digestible chunks. Fnaf 2 returns, and as such, so does the puppet. But what's really neat is that while the mechanics are the same, how the puppet gets to the office is different. And that's by walking. Yup, the puppet is actually walking now, and he's got a rubbery, wobbly walk cycle if I've ever seen one. This matches his sort of rubbery appearance in the game too, a sharp change from his initial sort of felt texturing. It's just so goofy how he comes in. I expect him to break out in like a Squidward interpretive dance. I've seen some questions about whether this disproves the puppet floating in the old minigames, and I don't think so. I think the new walk cycle was just a goofy and fun addition because they had the means to do so, and because animating the floating might have not been as visually interesting. And there could even be like an obscure story reason, like Fazent didn't want to admit that there was a floating puppet and that it wasn't some sort of Mandela effect caused by pizza and bleach fumes. You can even watch the puppet pop out of its box in real time on the screen, but you can't see it too well unless you play the pizza party level, during which you can get up close and personal in a dark room, and if you wait long enough, out it comes. Jump scare, done. Really cool animations. Help Wanted's animations and seeing the animatronics in motion is one of the biggest highlights of the game, in my opinion, and the puppet is no different, especially since in the original FNAF 2, our only animation was it leaping across the room and it's sort of popping up out of its box if you caught it at the right time. This is a lot more detailed. The puppet also has an action figure. It's very wiggly looking. This is the closest we've got to an actual puppet action figure. Nightmarionne also returns in the bedroom level where his tentacles come through a hole in the roof, the closet, under the bed, and you have to scare them off and him off with a flashlight. He also comes down the hallways too, now with extra wiggly licorice fingers, putting Marionette's wobbly legs to shame. But that's the majority of it, with no bigger story relevance for the puppet or its various versions. The Phantom Puppet doesn't even appear in the FNAF 3 remake. Anyways, moving onward. Next we have Freddy in Space 2, a sequel to FNAF World's Freddy in Space 57 that was significantly longer, with multiple playable characters, a bunch of upgrades, 2 endings. It was a much bigger deal, especially since it was part of a charity drive with St. Jude's. The basic premise is that Freddy is a space captain who returns from a mission to find his son kidnapped, his friends gone, and rogue AI lulz hacks having taken over. Thus, Freddy must shoot a bunch of stuff, save his friends, and save his son. A virtually impossible task due to the extremely tight time limit. The puppet is one of the playable characters and is specifically referred to as the weird gangly space puppet. It can be unlocked after completing the 4th level, Stellar Pit. But because you play through in any order, you can technically unlock the puppet pretty quickly. It'll just be hard without any upgrades. Unlike the others who have blasters, the puppet has a gift box that circles around it as you upgrade, making it, okay, admittedly one of the worst characters until you upgrade it, but it's pretty functional after that point. Also, I like how it doesn't quite hover and instead kind of just drags its legs all over the place. This is a sleepy puppet here, this thing ain't moving. I do appreciate that it's playable though, and despite it being maybe a little harder to control, I have mastered it. As much as you can master a striped jellyfish being orbited by gift boxes. There's also a slew of puppet-themed bosses for the game, such as the sock monkey, this thing I can barely pronounce the name of, Marionette, I think, the Puppinator, and Dawko. Continuing forth, the next game up to bat is Fnaf AR, a mobile game involving Freddy and his friends coming to your house, and you have to stare them down and shock them until they leave. For some bizarre reason, the puppet does not appear in Fnaf AR at all, despite all of the toys being in the game, and this is most likely because Lefty was supposed to be in the game. He was teased, he was modeled, he was almost totally finished. But then the game stopped updating and eventually was closed, leading to Lefty never being implemented. This was a shame because Fnaf AR introduced a ton of new voice lines for the animatronics, and plenty of skins for them as well, both of which Marionette would have benefited from. And considering how much of a major character Marionette was, it is very odd that he wasn't included, even if Lefty was intended to be introduced. That would be like if instead of having Balloon Boy in the game, they just had Nightmare Balloon Boy, since apparently I've heard that he's canon. Or if they replaced Freddy's band with their rock star counterparts, or at least one of them. Okay, maybe not so severe, but still you see what I mean. But alas, no go, so moving on. Fury's Rage was another Freddy in Space-styled spin-off released before Security Breach, teasing the game and starring the Glamrocks. Based off of Streets of Rage, Freddy and the band travel through the city trying to clean up all the riffraff. With their fists! The Marionette is one of many enemies you can fight, it being a little Glamrock styled with very pointy purple shoulder pads, which connect to the front at its button, and a purple belt. It also put on some thickness and instead of pointy legs has almost boot-shaped feet. What's most interesting though is that its facial design seems to be a direct reference to Ultimate Custom Night's anime puppet. Neat. Its eyes glow yellow and it shoots electricity out of its hands. But other than that, it's not too entirely unique from the others, save that for some reason it's the only enemy that appears alongside the final boss, I can't remember what its name is, the Dream Theory Snake. The Dreamgeist. Which, while I was looking up to remember what its name was, I actually found out that the Dreamgeist is known as the Marionette in the data. Which makes the fact that it's so connected to FNAF 4 it's even more strange. It even has the box in its head, but I digress. The puppet appears in Security Breach in a couple of cameos. A plush of it appears in a couple of places, but I can only remember it being in the closet in the West Arcade where the lever is, the second lever. Nightmarionne has a bunch of hidden plushies and has become something of an Easter egg. There's also a basketball game where the puppet, Security Puppet, and the Nightmarionne are on it. And what may also count as a cameo is how similar the staff bots look to the puppet, with 3 clamping fingers and little tear marks under their eyes, well, tear triangles. This is emphasized by the Alpha or Nightmare staff bots, who are designed to look a lot more like the Nightmarionne, with its face drawn on them, and stripes etched into its arms. And the tagline presented on their chests, "In your dreams." The puppet's mask even appears attached to the blob, also known as the Tangle. Though unless I'm wrong, you can't see it unless you go out of bounds. The dirty mask is missing its tear marks, but oddly enough, it's not burned either. I've seen some speculation that this isn't the real puppet's mask, but a prop. But also, it could have just been unfinished since you're not going to see it in the normal gameplay anyways. After all, it was after this point that Steel Wool started adding in more details for those who started to look out of bounds. But let's say this is supposed to be the same mask, now absorbed by the blob and missing the soul once inside. Just a leftover piece of Freddy's past. No puppet remaining. Let's go back to something I mentioned earlier about how the end of the puppet might have not entirely been a good thing. Now, I'm sure you assume this is simply coming from me wanting the puppet back, and I do. But I am 100% fine with having a totally different puppet show up. But there is one reason why getting rid of the puppet was a problem, and that's exactly what happened at the Pizzaplex. Missing children, missing employees, animatronics being puppeteered by viruses, and a possessed woman in a rabbit suit who not only has full control over Fazbear Entertainment and full reign on the Pizzaplex, but who is mirroring Afton's previous murders at the bequest of a rabbit virus who acts just like him. and nobody can stop them. Freddy's is disinterested in doing anything but covering things up. And sure, animatronics are assumedly not getting possessed anymore. Maybe jury's still out on Freddy's "I am not me" line. The kids are still dying. They're just being covered up a lot better. And it's not until one kid fights back that anything changes. It takes a kid to put a wrench in the works. This would have been an awfully good time to have the puppet around. The puppet can see through masks, which means Vanny would have been seen right through and this sock monkey would have been on her tail constantly. Does it mean that he could have caught up to her when Afton skirted him? No, but it does mean that there would have been something giving pushback. The price would be that animatronics would have started to become haunted again. But heck, maybe that would have led to Freddy's getting axed again. Who knows? There's positives and negatives here, but the point is that by taking the protector off the table, something like Vanny sprung up unopposed. Gregory got lucky in taking her out. Maybe, but now there's more threats cropping up left and right. It's a crying shame. I mean, it's worth it if Charlie got to actually move on, but if she's still stuck in limbo tormenting Afton, then yeah, no, that kind of actually sucks. Of course, it shouldn't be her job to stop Freddy's, but then again, it shouldn't have been Gregory's either. The point I'm making is that we can feel the loss of the puppet later in the series. In the early games, while it wasn't entirely effective, you could see where the lost souls were fighting back. But nowadays, there is none of that. And because of that, Fazbear Entertainment, Glitchtrap, the Mimic, all of them go entirely unchallenged. And I don't count Vanessa because both times she went up against Glitchtrap, she needed somebody else to do it for her. But I digress. Nightmarionne plushies return in Ruin, but that's about it. Funny enough, but Marionette has very few showings in Help Wanted 2. He appears as a pop-up in the Fnaf 2 based Phaser Blaster game. He has a Transformer-esque Phaz Force action figure, and there's a memory doll styled like him in the drawer in the private room under the password 1983, which, hilariously, connects to both Charlie's kidnapping in the books and the crying child in the games, but no physical appearance of the puppet at all. Though there is something odd here, and that's with those memory dolls. So there is a password with their graves, where you light them in order to unlock a secret Bonnie mask. The first is Chica, and this plays into Withered Chica's line in Ultimate Custom Night, "I was the first, I have seen everything." Susie, the girl who possessed Chica, is pretty much the only missing child who we know a good deal about, really. So, the adopted conclusion was that Susie was the first child Afton killed. Well, except for Charlie, of course. And for reference, all 5 of the kids weren't killed at once. The newspapers say that 2 were taken at one point, and later say 5 are now missing. So it happened over time. This lines up with Pizzeria Simulator showing Susie getting targeted alone. That's not important. The important part is that Susie's an important character. She was the only one we really knew about. Chica saying she was taken first, and Memory Doll line up with Chica being the first in the password. And what also lines up with it is Golden Freddy is the 5th, which lines up with the original Give Gifts, Give Life minigame. And then is the puppet. The puppet comes last. Now, the reason for the puppet coming last, despite it technically being first, is still unknown. There is no explanation for this. There's been theories. I suppose the best option is that this is the death order, but the puppet was just added on last because 6th sort of special added on character, and it's the exception to the rule. Honestly, I'm leaning into that one now, but who knows. Perhaps someday it'll be given a meaning. Also, Lefty has a first aid Helpy repair level here where he crawls at you whenever Helpy starts screaming. He's the medium difficulty, between Pig Patch is easy and Scrap Baby's hard, so he's getting up in the world. No new lines though, but his jump scare noise is pretty creepy. But that's all we can really say about Help Wanted 2. It is sort of disappointing that the puppet took a backseat, but what are you going to do? It's a bigger shame that Monty took a backseat. That poor sucker. Continuing on, 5 Laps at Freddy's is a FNAF racing game coming out sometime in the future with a demo currently out. The puppet is a playable character, a lightweight who works best in the cupcake, but also drives pretty much fine on all the other machines. It kinda takes on a FNAF world sort of design, and it's pretty cute. That's all there really is to say about it. There was a canceled Balloon World-esque game that I think might have been connected with Chica in Space 3, but that's a story for another time. The important part is that there would have been 3 puppet design characters, Puppet Chica, Puppet Bonnie, and Puppet Foxy. All black with white stripes on their arms and legs, and white buttons. Bonnie also has a white bow tie, and Foxy has a white hook and a raccoon-looking tail. And I really love them. I like how Chica kinda looks like she has a bird skull on, and Bonnie's pointy bunny ears, and how their tear marks actually match their eye colors. It's possible that the puppet would have had a story element in the game, and maybe there was like a puppet Freddy that didn't make it into the book, but we'll probably never know. Into the Pit was supposed to have a puppet cameo in the form of a cut Jack-in-the-Box. It's actually pretty cute. Shame it was cut. Now on to the most recent game, Secret of the Mimic. While the puppet doesn't appear, newcomer Jackie begins to resemble the puppet the more she is broken up. Now, Jackie in the Box is already likely a puppet predecessor, being in a box that looks like his own, which plays my grandfather clock, being a Jack-in-the-Box. But, as she's getting worn down in her chase of Arnold, while being warned by the Mimic, she gets some facial damage, including losing her nose and having black oil ooze from her eyes, making her resemble the puppet a lot more than she once did. And in the trailer, they reveal her without her hair or hat, and she looks a lot like the puppet. But is she the puppet? Or a puppet? Well, the jury's out on that one too. Odds are that she's just like puppet adjacent more than a direct connection. But that's not the only mention of the puppet maybe. Located up in Edwin Murray's attic, on his personal terminal, we see 2 redacted files. One for alternate Fazbear designs, the possible designs mentioned by Edwin in an audio log downstairs, the ones that led to his deal with Fazbear Entertainment falling into turmoil, and puppet designs. Now, I believe these are for the puppet, and not the puppet show puppets for 2 reasons. 1, why would the Foxy Puppet Show figures, ones that are nearly broadcasted on TV, ones that are just plush bodies on top of broomsticks and strings, why would they be hidden on Edwin's personal computer when the theater wasn't a private project? Not only were employees involved with that, but guests could come by and actually watch the shows. And more importantly, why would these designs, button-eyed stitched kebab Foxy, be redacted? And be redacted alongside the alternate Fazbear designs, exchanged likely only between Henry, William, and Edwin. Not to mention, from what we know of the timing, this restaurant Edwin was working on with Henry and Afton was the one before Fnaf 2, likely. The one after the diner before Fnaf 2, where the puppet likely gave life to the missing children after they were taken. This would have also likely been the location where Charlie was taken from. We're not sure the exact date she was taken. The books say 1983, I believe, and assuming it was before the crying child's bite, and Secret of the Mimic happens in 1979, it would at least add up. All this to say, these hidden, secret, redacted puppet designs squirreled away in the attic beside an alternate Fazbear designs were likely not being featured in MCM's walk-in theater. But we don't have any other details. Maybe someday. And moving on, that's it. A bunch of cameos, a few little blips, and gone. The end of the puppet story. Unlike many other Fnaf characters who have a bunch of variations of the character, the puppet has not. We have it, Nightmarionne, security puppet, Lefty, kinda, and maybe Jackie. And the only one who really does anything being Nightmarionne, and Lefty when he feels like it. So, it's time to get into the books, and thankfully this won't take as long, since the puppet actually doesn't appear a lot. The Silver Eyes trilogy features Charlie front and center as the main lead. A young woman returning to her hometown, Charlie must learn about the dark past of her family, Freddy's, and the Purple Man himself, all while meeting up with her old friends. It actually does a reframing of the Fnaf 3 minigame where Afton is spring-locked after being tricked into his suit by the ghost, by instead having him get into his suit and then Charlie sets off the spring locks. That too. Then in the second book, Charlie finds herself being drawn in by a mysterious door and cannot stop thinking about her twin, all while being chased by Afton, who is now Springtrap, and his band of twisted animatronics. And then in the third book, Charlie is revealed to be a robot, and Circus Baby is actually her adult body, and the two fight against each other while Afton tries his latest scheme, leading to the finale. Charlie is an interesting character, one I've talked about quite a bit. She's smart, but she makes risky, dumb decisions. She's a bit awkward, but she has a good heart. But she is traumatized by her past, the memories she has, and the memories Henry faked. But if there's anything I can say about her, and this is a good and bad thing, it's that she seizes the plot and drives it forward. She's not passive, well, at least not in the first book. See, the problem is, she sort of falls into a victim of the plot. Through the course of the books, it sort of takes back progression and makes her have sudden lapses of out-of-character behavior just to move the plot along. And by the third book, she's really just a prop, as the main character role shifts to John, Jessica, and Carlton, three of her friends. But that being said, this is our only way to know anything about Charlie, since she is not really mentioned in the games to any degree outside of what we take from the puppet's characterization. To which, Charlie and the puppet aren't very similar at all. But that makes sense. If you raise two identical twins in separate situations, odds are they would show completely different behaviors and traits. Though it is kind of a shame that the stand-in for the would-be protector of the animatronics and assumedly the children doesn't do either in her book series. And that's again, not to say that she's a bad character, but it goes to show the changing focus of the books. It also should be of note that the puppet is never mentioned in the books, though it is possible that it exists since this Charlie is a robot duplicate who wasn't possessed by the real Charlie. So technically, the puppet could be out there somewhere. I also feel like this is a good place to throw this in here. You remember when I mentioned the save him, save her thing? My reason for believing that theory is not connected with me not liking Charlie. In fact, Charlie is one of my favorite characters despite how wonky the books get her sometimes. And I don't mind her being the puppet. In fact, if there's any character throughout Fnaf who I would have been totally okay with being the puppet, it probably would have been Charlie. Though admittedly, I do think I like Charlie herself enough that I kind of would have preferred that she was not the puppet and then have a chance of appearing in the games, because as of now she's just another nameless, faceless dead kid, while book Charlie was a lot more colorful. But that's enough of that. I've made so many Charlie videos already, so pick your poison and I'll continue on. As to be expected, the puppet also has a page in the character encyclopedia, and I ended up having it, so I'll read it now. The puppet. Is it stringing you along? Data file. Name, the puppet. Type, Marionette. Game appearances, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 3, Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Short story collection appearances, You're the Band. The puppet is a marionette, which is a puppet operated by strings. In fact, it's sometimes known as the Marionette. It's a spindly thing with a mask-like face and a narrow body, very different from the animatronics that operate around the pizzeria. Instead, it's one of the items in the prize corner at the relaunched Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and it attacks if the music box is not wound up. The puppet is very tricky to deal with. If its attack begins, even if you prevent a jump scare at that point, it will head towards the office and can't be seen on the cameras. Winding up the music box won't help you now. You just have to make it through to 6 a.m. In touch with your inner child. In the Happiest Day minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, you actually get to play as the puppet, which happens again in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. Some clues about what the puppet really is can be found in these minigames. Slim, isn't it? You might almost say, slender. So who's pulling the strings? So on the whole, the puppet's page is, well, it's okay. It's not as rough as some of the other ones I've seen, but upon reading through it a second time, the first time I was going to say it was fine. Upon reading through it a second time, I can see there are a few mistakes. Let me just correct those now. Under game appearances, it doesn't mention things like Fnaf World or any of the spin-off games. The puppet is a marionette, which is a puppet operated by strings. The beginning introduction paragraph seems a little kind of wonky. The name's kind of off. It says it has a mask-like face. That's not correct. It has a mask. It's referred to not as an animatronic, but as an item in the prize corner, which is just not correct. It is an animatronic. It's not an item. this whole section over here that says the puppet's very tricky to deal with when an attack begins, that it's worded very weird. I mean, it's technically correct, but it's almost worded like someone didn't actually know what was going on, but they kind of summarized it anyway. And I don't know, there's something off with the last paragraph as well. Well, the fact that it mentions these minigames about the puppet, but it doesn't mention what actually happens in them. In fact, there's actually, if you look at this, there's actually pretty much not a lot of details on the puppet at all, considering the fact that Charlie and Henry and all of those characters are mentioned later. And yeah, that is a direct callback to the fact that Marionette was, I guess, based off of the Slender Man. So, it's pretty shallow. It doesn't say anything too inaccurate. Except, like, another thing, the name being the puppet and the type being the marionette, that's actually sort of reversed since its name is often listed as Marionette and it is a puppet. Now, the pictures are varied. It's good that we don't have two of the same kind. I would have preferred maybe having pictures that weren't just in the model view or background, but on the whole, they're at least pretty good. This one out here, that you've seen me probably using earlier in the video, has actually been clipped and cut very well, so that one is actually pretty good. The odd part here is that unlike Charlie's page, which shows Book Charlie and talks about Game Charlie, the puppet page doesn't say it's Charlie, and it's not because of spoilers since Charlie's page says that she's the puppet. So what gives? Well, one of the issues with the character encyclopedia is that the information is not transmitted through pages. Like sometimes one page will say something and another will contradict it. Bonnette's the first Bonnie who's a girl, but Bon Bon is also a girl. I was swapped back and forth. Or things like Henry's page saying he and Afton may have worked together and not naming Charlie while still acknowledging the books. Sort of like it was a collaborative piece where everyone did a few pages and didn't pass notes. But that being said, there's nothing, like, terribly egregious. This isn't like a Helpy situation where the whole page is talking about how horrible Helpy is. And this isn't a Henry situation where the whole page is typing out what happened in a cutscene and then not really actually explaining what was really happening. As for Fazbear Frights, the puppet appears twice, once in the epilogues and once in a story, but it never features as the main animatronic in any of them. I'm pretty sure there's like an occasional mention here or there, but only 2 real appearances. In the epilogue series, Detective Larson is investigating a masked Dindo known as the Stitch Wraith, which is possessed by 2 kids, Jake and Andrew. And also Afton, who survived a fire and hid in the Stitch Wraith before possessing a large amount of trash and becoming a giant rabbit amalgam. If there was any greater indication that Afton was a garbage human being. While searching for evidence from a Freddy's fire, Larson finds something and stuffs it in a bag. This turns out to be the puppet, and during the confrontation with Afton, it is revealed that what he found was the puppet. Okay, I said that twice. Which calls to him, with multiple voices.
How many kids you got in there?
It says, "Take me to him." Funny enough, he doesn't. Larson ditches the bag and starts attacking Afton with a forklift when Afton starts sucking things into him, and the puppet gets sucked in, and a little while later, the amalgam rabbit pretty much dies. Or he calls himself Agony. Agony Afton dies, and it and the puppet sink to the bottom of the lake. See, this is exactly why we needed this thing at the Pizzaplex. Didn't even move and it screwed up Afton's plans. Though I must admit, the puppet's addition is a little shoehorned in. Don't really entirely understand why it was even here. The only story the puppet really features in is the cut bonus story, You're the Band. A story that is one of my favorites because it features Mike, the puppet, and good parenting. So, a rarity there. On all 3 accounts, I'll keep it brief. Mom buys kid a Freddy mask, kid gets possessed, Mike shows up, kid runs off the Freddys, they run off the Freddys, puppet drops in from the ceiling, Mike screams like a little girl, mom gives mask back, Freddy's back to work, puppet sees this, deems all is well, heads back into the attic, and Mike, mom, and the kid all get the heck out, and it all is well. Now, what's interesting is the puppet is, like, insanely in character in this moment. I mean it. It's aggressive, but only because it's protective of the animatronics. And when they basically give Freddy back, it just quietly exits scene right and goes back to sleep, fitting in with the supposed character of the puppet, really just watching over them and only trying to target Afton. It's a genuinely reasonable puppet at times. It's not a huge part of the story, I just think it's a nice little bonus on a story that feels very much like a love letter to Fnaf, and a series that at times tends to push the boundaries of what it counts as Fnaf related. But that's it. It might get mentioned in Tales from the Pizzaplex, but it doesn't have any stories that it features in. Moving on to merch, there is so much puppet merch. I was planning on showing off some of mine because I have a puppet collection, but the video was so long, and I'm not going to, not in this one. Instead, I'll just show off a few highlights, such as the Lefty and puppet statue, which shows the puppet actually in Lefty peeking out. This is something I've seen a lot of fan art from, but never in Fnaf itself, and it looks great. With its arms and hands grabbing at the head and grabbing at the side, clawing at it. Its wiggly legs sliding out through the crack in its belly. Is it mischievously peeking out or trying to escape its prison? It also goes to show how much of a prison Lefty itself is. Its body is prone, mouth agape as its victim tries to escape. Lifeless. It's perfect. Also, here's a tiny plush backpack hanger that looks like a baby puppet, and he's so adorable. Little soft, chubby little baby thing. There's also so many plushies and little U2's heads, a security puppet plush, a Squitch Me stress toy. This little tiny puppet has its legs sticking out of the box, a little tiny puppet in a little present gift box race car, the coolest shirt I own, the neatest poster too. And yet somehow, no action figure. Nightmarionne had one, but the puppet, nope. And weirder still, they just did a new line for the FNAF 2 movie, and it didn't include one either. But when it comes to merch, the puppet is a frequent face. We just got a puppet duck, and it's perfect. But again, I can't go through all the merch right now. Instead, let's move on to FNAF 2, the movie. Now, the movie is not out yet, but it's already looking like the puppet will be a major character. In the trailer, we can hear the Music Box music, and the movie was codenamed Music Box. And there's even this spell and speak toy known as a Faz Talker that seems to be a direct callback to the spelled out words in the FNAF 2 minigames. We do see the puppet twice, though not directly. In one scene, a woman is looking into its empty box, and we see its hands on the ceiling. Then later, Vanessa is standing there, and the puppet kind of moves around out of focus behind her. Maybe I'm wrong, but the puppet looks to be a little on the small side, and that's adorable. I also wonder if it's going to be like puppeteered to look like it's dangling from strings, like traditional puppeteering movement. That'd be neat. So yeah, there's hints that it'll be a major character, but the movie's not out yet. Originally, I was planning on waiting until then or closer to then to do this video, but I got impatient. So, that makes this the end of the line. This is the stopping point, and the end of the puppet's history. One that started out very strong, and then sort of petered out towards the end. As you saw, the puppet was a major character, the major through-line character for a while. And then it was killed off and kinda just never really had a big role ever again. And it's a shame, because there hasn't ever been any real new puppets. Like, no Glamrock puppet, no Funtime puppet, no Jug Band puppet. The closest thing we had was a security puppet, and that thing was a statue. And that makes the loss of the puppet even more devastating, because not only are we missing out on this really cool character, and a morally gray one as well, but we're missing out on this incredibly cool design and model. We could just have a new puppet variant that isn't Charlie. Like how Funtime Freddy and Glamrock Freddy are leagues different from one another. Does Charlie's death really have to signal the death of any future puppets? Especially since Fazbear Entertainment is willing to drag up anything and make it a star? It seems like it could work, but I'm biased. I've gotten asked a few times why I like the puppets so much, and it sort of boils down to three things. The incredibly neat design, the detailed backstory, and the fact that it was pretty much what got me into FNAF in the first place. So a long time ago, I watched someone play FNAF. I can't remember who, maybe Manly Badass Hero, and then I watched Markiplier play it. It was so early that he hadn't even played it yet. And I liked the series so far. It was neat. But then when the trailers and teasers for FNAF 2 appeared, I noticed something. On one of the walls, there was a drawing of a mysterious-looking mime character, and at the time, nobody was talking about it. So it sort of felt like I discovered this secret character. It was my first investment in the lore, this funny mime thing. And then I finally saw the puppet in a Markiplier thumbnail, and full disclosure, I thought it looked kinda weird at first. But it grew on me fast, along with the storyline surrounding it and in the games following, and it quickly became my favorite character. I think the sudden and somewhat horrifying death aspect only intensified that. I always get attached to characters 2 seconds before they're gone forever. And I'll admit it outright. My desire to get another puppet is clearly to fill in for the old one. I lost a puppet. Okay, that's fine. Let's give me another one. It's like when your old copy of Pokemon Emerald that barely function already dies, and you buy a Celebi plush to replace the only Celebi you ever owned, one that you only got because you got the game secondhand. I wanted to see another puppet design and be like, oh yeah, there we go, new puppet. But it didn't happen, and it makes the loss of the character a lot more permanent. And you may think that's on purpose, and I would believe it too, but even Circus Baby had Eleanor, and then the sort of sideways evolution into Vanny. It's a long story. The puppet does still appear in spin-offs, don't get me wrong, but there's always this sort of funky feeling attached. He dead. Now I know how all those Sun and Moon fans felt when they merged into Eclipse and mentally died. Wait a minute. Oh god, I hyperfixate on them too. Son of a... Now all I've got is Glamrock Freddy's head and the concept of Captain Foxy. So, will the puppet return? No. I'm pretty sure no. For a while I built myself up seeing stuff that wasn't there. That was leading to a puppet reveal, and instead it just led to Jackie. And if Jackie truly was the result of this possible puppet baiting, then yeah, no shot, no more puppet. And that's not to say that I don't like Jackie, but she's way more clown than puppet. At least it's presented so far. I'm sure it's still going to be returning in spin-offs though. I just mean like a main game, and I mean both the original or like a major offshoot. I think we crossed that bridge. But it's still going to be racing, and it's still going to get duck merch. Now to end this, I want to go back to something I just mentioned that I haven't brought up yet, I don't think, that is very important to the discussion of Marionette, if my recent hot take video was any indication. And that's that, as black and white as the puppet is, it's pretty morally gray. By all accounts, Marionette believes what it's doing is right. It believes giving life to the animatronics is on the same level as giving a gift. It believes that it is protecting them. It believes that it can lure the band into tracking down and taking out the Purple Man. It believes this. It's not a trick. It's not a mislead. It is very deliberate. But this also means that, at its hand, it has trapped 5 or more children's souls into animatronics, possibly delaying their moving on, though with all the haunted arcade machines, I'm not so sure anything's moving on naturally in this situation. But the puppet's actions guarantee that they are trapped, and then it sends them on a crusade against their own murderer. In a way, it's almost a reflection of what Henry did to them. Trap them, bind them to a suit, and then sick them into a maze with the sounds of children, distant music, and Afton's own grizzled voice as he prowls the vents. But there is a big difference here, and it really boils down to the fact that the puppet at its core is puppeteered by a murdered child. Then was left at Freddy's for years. At any point, Henry could have tried to do something, but he didn't. His words suggest that he knew something sooner than this, but he let the wound fester. He had the option, but the puppet did not. The puppet had a bunch of dead children and one surefire way to bring them back. When you're on the cusp of death, especially one as traumatic as that, your thoughts aren't to peacefully slip away. You're afraid. You're angry, and the animatronics were. And the puppet was the one to keep its head on its shoulders. Morally gray, yes, but by whose morals? How's anyone in this situation supposed to take a moral high ground if they don't know what it is? Especially if that moral high ground also results in the bad guy getting away scot-free. I think it's something worth mentioning. And that's to say, I don't think that the hot takes were necessarily misappropriating the puppet when they were saying it's not a totally good character because it attacks humans and because it traps other souls. I think that that's a very good take. I think that actually makes a lot of sense. But I don't think it's as cut and dry to say it's actually worse. It actually does bad things, because I think that a lot of the actions it takes are backed by misappropriated morals more than anything. Marionette was, and still is, a surprisingly complex character despite the limited amount of time we got hearing its voice and understanding its motives. The first substantially important character introduced alongside William Afton, a reoccurring haunted face with a creepy but cute design, with a detailed backstory and a tragic ending. It has always been unique, not like the others. From its angry eyes to its noodle legs, the Marionette has stood out as a staple of Five Nights at Freddy's, even though it's no longer playing the role of protector. And at the very least, I think it's pretty neat. Thank you for watching.